See if anybody else rolls in, and then we can get started. It's piqued my interest. Now I'm looking up this Reno office.
Let me know if there's any stuff I need to check out.
Did your badge just work, or did you have to talk to people?
It would have worked. I didn't bring it. I wasn't quite anticipating this, but no, they gave me a new one and yep. So,
Wow,
yeah,
that's pretty awesome.
they're quite nice here, quite accommodating. It's also like 5 minutes from the airport, so I think they get this a lot. Like I
Oh.
walked up to them and they're like, "Oh, yep, another one." So,
Are there slot machines in the lobby?
no, but I can give that feedback.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, win some Microsoft swag. That'd be something.
It is on brand.
Yeah. All right. I think we can get started now. So, we have Michael joining us today. So just to make sure, these meetings are recorded if we follow the CNCF code of conduct. So if you don't want to be recorded, this is the time to hop off. Otherwise, these videos will be posted on YouTube later on the Akri, actually the Deus Labs YouTube channel. Cool. So to get started, we don't really have any announcements, I guess, aside from Kate working out of the Reno office. So we'll hop straight to discussions. The first thing on our list is talking about UDEV Discovery Handler enhancements, discovering multiple dev nodes for one device. As we know, sometimes we plug in some USB device and a couple dev nodes come up. So Kate, do you want to take this one?
Yes. So there's two things going on here. One is we had an issue where with UDEV, we've seen this with USB cameras where one USB camera will have multiple dev nodes, one that's actually doing the capturing feature and the other that has some metadata. And so we have an issue on GitHub that kind of walks through how you can modify your UDEV rule to only find the camera with the capture properties. So I think that one's resolved. The other issue that we've had that people have brought up is the fact that sometimes you want to capture multiple nodes for a device. And so this is a thread that we had on the Slack, and I think someone had a customer who was interested in this scenario and was going to go back to that customer for more feedback on it. But essentially, right now, our discovery handler defines a device as a single dev node, and that's not accurate in a lot of places. So kind of a discussion around how we could change that discovery handler. We would certainly need to add some more parameters of some sort. Right now with our discovery handler, it's nice the way that we do it because it's all we do is specify a UDEV rule. And that's kind of nice and clean because we don't have to own documentation on what a UDEV rule is. You can literally go look that up. And so that's a good setup that we have, but it seems like we might need another filter added that does something along the lines of like a union type that's like this and this. So I don't know if others have any thoughts around this of how we could define this. Maybe it'd be helpful to kind of, and maybe the next step is building a proposal around this. We can maybe start with like its minor discussion and then we can have a proposal written around it. But does anyone have any initial thoughts on that?
I guess if we were to add some sort of filtering, would this be like some sort of custom, like Akri specific way of doing generic device filtering, or is this just could be like a UDEV specific kind of abstraction on top that allows us to kind of join different dev nodes together?
I would think UDEV specific. So just how with like on VIF, you can filter by MAC or IP address, we would enable you to filter, yeah, to add an extra feature. So right now I was gonna go ahead and let me see if I can grab the host key and share screen. Okay. So let me pull up kind of how we define UDEV. Maybe the docs is a good way to start with that. Okay. So with UDEV, when you are specifying what you want to discover, the only filter you can add, so the only configuration you can add is a UDEV rules array. So in our configuration, that's literally just an array of rules, and our discovery handler will find all devices that fit that set of rules. So we want to be able to specify something that can basically say this and this. I don't even know how we go about saying that. So for example, say you wanted video 0 and video 1 dev node, how would we specify that those should be jointly done? Maybe um, maybe there's a certain identifier that's across those nodes. So maybe both video 0 and video 1, because they are the same device, have some shared property. So maybe there's a way we could say every device with this shared property. And maybe that's like a manufacturing ID or something like that. But I think part of this will be doing some investigation into how do we identify a set of devices, and is there a way to do that? And maybe there's a range concept. Maybe are these devices all a linear step of each other, like video 0 and video 1, or is it more of a different kernel names, and is it spread out, and how do we understand the bucketing there? So I think there needs to be some investigation into that. I don't know if, does anyone here have any have they encountered kind of a device with multiple nodes, or have any ideas around what might be the norm with this, or how to figure out the norm with this?
I guess the only thing that comes to mind is whether this can actually be done just like using pure UDEV rules. I'm not sure if UDEV has any like built-in support for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Yeah, interesting. Well, I think we need to spend some more time thinking about this. It's certainly been a while since I've looked at the UDEV implementation. So seeing kind of what we're doing now and where we can kind of push it, and then putting together proposals. So I think this is a good discussion to kick us off, and people can kind of reference back to this recording too if they kind of want to know the issue space. But did we, Brian, did you end up making an issue for this? I know you put up a bunch of issues that one week. Do we have an issue for capturing this one, or is that a to-do that we should do as well?
It's a good question that I don't have the answer to off the top of my head.
Great. I can check in on that. And this might transition, what we see on our screen here might transition to our next, this security alert might transition to the next topic. Well, but we want, I bet UDEV will be in. Okay. Well, I don't see one, so let's put a to-do on that to add an issue for that. Or I guess, yeah, and capture the conversation from Slack in that. Any more thoughts on this? Okay, so it sounds like to conclude this up, we'll have an issue that tracks this, and then that issue can be attached to any proposal that in the future is made.
Yep, sounds good.
I can go ahead and transition us to that second point there, Edric.
Yep.
So the second agenda item was discussing, should we move things out of Akri core? So for example, right now our OPCUA broker is on an old version of the OPCUA client, the .NET OPCUA client, which has a security vulnerability. And so when you go to Akri's repo, you see, I don't know if this is just me as an owner of the repo or everyone, but I personally see a security vulnerability. And that sounds like Akri has a problem, when in reality, it's our sample, our example that we don't recommend people use in production scenarios has the security alert. And so separating our samples, namely our brokers and our applications, out from Akri core, and maybe even bringing out the discovery handlers, that would be maybe a second wave or something that we might want to prioritize. And maybe we create an issue to capture this and track it, because that is something that down the line we might want to do just to make sure. But at the same time, the issue with that is people might not know where to go to find things. I mean, separating out repositories can always lead to a little bit of confusion there. Do people have any thoughts for or against moving, namely this folder into its own repository, the webhooks into its own repository, and potentially even discovery handlers and discovery handler modules, but the foremost being samples and webhooks? And ideally, we would move discovery utils out and make that a library, a cargo library that anyone could use as well. So there's a lot. This can be extended to a lot of things, but any thoughts around this?
I think moving out samples for sure. That just seems intuitive to me, and it also kind of decouples the development of like the samples and Akri core. Yeah, I guess the only thing that pops up in my mind is that do we just take basically, do we have a new repo that's samples and then all the samples sit underneath it? Do we have a new repo for each sample? You know, I don't know if having a repo for each sample is scalable, but then, you know, if you have one sample repo, then the same kind of security issue comes up, right? If, you know, something in one sample has a security issue, it looks like the whole repo has an issue. But I guess if it's a sample repo, I think it's a little bit more forgiving compared to having security vulnerabilities pop up in like, you know, Akri core.
Right. I think my first thought would be to not break it to be super micro like that. But I think one way we could break it is we could have sample brokers and sample apps be separate. I'm also fine with just samples. Roa?
Yeah, hi everyone. I just want to double down on the suggestion. I actually think it's pretty common for most of the projects to have like their samples or examples in a separate repo. So yeah, I wouldn't worry much about discoverability in this case. So just, yeah, I want to add that.
Awesome. Yeah, another +1 on that. Yeah, and I think you also mentioned we might want to name it examples as well. I don't know if it really matters, but that seems more common to say examples rather than samples. So maybe we also do that kind of rename when we're at it. Roa, any thoughts on keeping apps and brokers within the examples or having them be separate?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I would keep them for now. And again, we can maybe in the future as we extend like more brokers and stuff, then we can split it out.
Okay, so maybe to start, we create one issue that's just move the samples folder into an examples repo. Keep it kind of constrained like that. And then we can have subsequent issues around moving discovery handlers and other parts out potentially.
How coupled is, I think like if we move the other ones, like how coupled are these things? Like, is it just literally like taking it, popping over, or I guess like probably all the build, the CI/CD will have to migrate over.
Yeah, I'm not positive on how that's going to look. But I think we can still do like triggering workflows across repositories within the same organization, but I'm not 100% familiar with that. And so will, like, if other people have understanding of that, that would be great. We can also do an investigation on that. Great. So it sounds like we've got two issues that we want to tackle. One is move examples to own repo and investigate workflow work. And then the other one is modify dev discovery handler to multiple nodes. Cool. I think that's all I had to say on these 2 points. While we're looking at it, are there any thoughts that people have around tracking? I know we've talked about this in the past, but like tracking repository stats on like a long-term thing, like these forks watching stars. I know, Brian, you found that site that shows you stars over time. But I think views, it's really hard to capture how many people have visited the page over time. So we could also brainstorm how to measure that a little. With dev stats that we get from CNCF, it doesn't track views, which is kind of surprising. Or I might be wrong on that, but from my first look at it, that's one thing I noticed.
Yeah, I don't know actually how we would do it with pure, like just a pure GitHub when people click onto it, right? Like if we're using the short links or link outs from docs, it might be like through those tools you might be able to get a count, but just from how many people have visited this repo, I don't know if we can how to do that. Let's see. Huh. Let's see. Insights and then traffic. See that works. Code, insights.
Yeah, but it'll only show for the past at most 1 month.
I see.
Which, so you could see like traffic. Yeah.
Curious if they have an API that lets you pull more, but
Because like it would be interesting to know why we got so much on 6-30. Like, does anyone know why we would have gotten a lot that day?
6-30. Did we do any announcements or anything on 6-30?
Well, my guess is whenever we run the workflows, we have a clone done in the, the workflow VM or whatever, wherever it's running. So I would guess that whenever we rerun our workflows, we get a spike here as well. So that's kind of my guess.
That's a good point, Roa. Maybe this is when, maybe 6-30 is when we were looking at merging a PR. And so it's all the workflows. That's why the unique ones is important to look at. But I wonder if each GitHub runner VM counts as a unique cloner.
Well, I think it would vary, right? If it's a different VM, then probably it's going to be a different cloner, but maybe GitHub optimizes so they're kind of will show as like less, but then there's still like more clones than unique.
Yeah. Regardless, I think that points out how this isn't a really helpful stat. In the sense of like, it might just be us. We would almost need a parallel stat that's showing how many times our workflows ran, and almost like unique VMs ran to get a sense of like what the actual traffic is. Interesting. I guess visitors is more helpful, right? Like the VM doesn't count as a visitor, I would assume.
I would assume so. Taking a look at the GitHub API to see also like if we can pull any more data, but it seems like everything's capped at like 14 days.
Yeah. Just another thing to look at.
Mhm.
And then the only other thing I wanted to discuss is security, like with Dependabot alerts. How do we want to prioritize these? So I've in the past been like trying to make sure any high ones are resolved in Akri core like immediately, which is currently still the case. So like this is on our samples and our samples, and then we have one that is a moderate in our core one that we should look at. What do people think about? Obviously this will vary with breaking out our repositories, but prioritizing security vulnerabilities. Is this linked to an issue? Oh, I think this is the one that we've had for a while in our issues that we were kind of stuck on because of dependencies. So I think we have been tracking this one, but we can circle back and double check that. Yeah. This one's been going for a while. So we should, yeah, it looks like it's on Chrono to remove the dependency of the issue. So we should check back in and see if we can update Chrono to a later version. We did just do our dependency update, so maybe not, but another one to do a double check on. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's interesting, Roa, that you're saying a lot of people are interested in excluding clones. Very cool. Okay, from the traffic insights. Okay, I think that's all I had on the discussion side. Anyone else have anything that they wanted to bring up top of mind?
I think we're good. Is it a issue triage time?
It is issue triage time. Who's leading that? Brian.
But I don't see any issues.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought I added some to it.
I saw two earlier, but there were things they're in progress or you had reactivated, so I put into investigating.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, then it sounds like we're all good.
Cool. Well, I guess if there's no issues, then we can end a little bit early today.
Awesome. And then what's the workflow for getting these uploaded to YouTube?
Yeah. So normally the way it works is that I have access to the Deus Labs. I have access on Deus Labs Zoom instance, which the recordings are held in the Deus Labs Zoom kind of room management section on the Zoom settings. I basically just download those. I chuck them into a video editor. And pretty much all I do is just trim them, add the Akri logos at the beginning and the end. And that's pretty much it. And
Okay,
then,
cool.
yeah, that gets rendered and then it gets uploaded to YouTube, which I also have access to the Deus Labs YouTube account. So I can also, yeah.
Okay. And then Michael, is that work that are you onboarding onto doing that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. And then the only thing I remember with that is that we have to remember to delete them from the Deus Labs instance after we've downloaded them, because if not, the cache like fills up and then we won't be able to, like, a recording will be cut off mid-recording.
Yeah.
Adric, do you have a good contact for me to reach out to get access to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Karen is the person that can grant you access to that, and she can also kind of tell you. It's pretty simple. Pretty much, she adds you to both Zoom and then YouTube. And you know, Michael, we can kind of go through how to do it at some point.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay. Well, are we gonna, I think we can end early then.